Hello friends, welcome to the second installment of my read aloud of my novel, The Potion Dealers. If you're new to this, obviously, you're going to want to start with the first installment. I also have a read aloud that's complete of my book, Doll Girl Meets Dead Guy, which is set in the same world as this book. After I finish reading, and this is a real chill, real casual sort of deal. After I finish reading, I'll also give a little bit of background information on some of inspirations and things about the book as I was writing it. And here and there, I'll pop in some of my sketches of the characters that I drew while I was writing it. So without further ado, let's get back to The Potion Dealers. Disheveled Editing Lydia here, just to apologize for the very annoying sunlight throughout this video. I just didn't realize as I was filming it how flickery and annoying that sunlight would be when I actually watched the footage, but these videos are way too long and way too un-algorithm friendly for me to re-record it. Like if it was a regular video, I would have re-recorded it, but I'm not going to do it with this one. So I'm very sorry, and I will never film under those conditions ever again. Also, I hope you enjoy my cicadas because, I gotta have the window open or I would die. Chapter 9, Livonya Sets Forth. They had to do a little sneaking around to avoid any gossips. Livonya strolled the woods by the road outside of town, and they picked her up there. Fernanda was behind her in mere moments. She had never owned a horse, and no one had a car, while the next village was 15 miles away, too far to walk. Now the 15 miles whizzed by in moments. That was when it sunk in. She had just left home with strangers, and she would be so far from Fernanda that she might as well have flown to the moon. Hopefully my grandparents understand why I left so abruptly, she murmured. They never exactly tried to keep me here, not like Uncle Fravel, but they would never have understood either. I bet you'll come home with good stories and they'll be proud of you. I've escaped first and explained later a few times myself, Alfred said. To do what? Hunt for treasure. Alfie is building an archive, George said. It's not so much treasure as it is musty books no one else wants that we have to climb hills and wrangle with people's relatives to get. Alfred looked slightly sheepish. Yes, sometimes. Books? Magical books? Livonia wondered what books would be of interest to Alfred. He couldn't read them, or was there a spell for that? Must be. They're the writings of all the sorcerers blinded in the war, Alfred said. So it's true that no one else wants them, but it doesn't mean they're not valuable. I thought blinded Daramons would just kill themselves, Livonia said. Isn't that what your leader would say? If she was going with them, she might as well poke at their beliefs. He is not our leader, Alfred said, seeming insulted. My family hasn't followed the Wodrina rune since grandfather's day. But you're right, that is what Lord Jaron would say. Blinding a man was considered as good as killing him. Sometimes they would even have potions waiting to assist the suicide as soon as the injured men made it off the battlefield. Then no one had time to consider survival, and Jaron and his higher-ups didn't have to think twice about what to do with all of these men they considered so useless and shameful. Whew, she exclaimed. I didn't realize you'd get so upset, but I can see why. Eventually a little rebellion brewed, and some of the sorcerers in particular decided they had no intention of killing themselves, Alfred said. They had worked hard for their skill with magic, and even if fighting magic is usually quite visual, they felt sure they could find other ways of making themselves useful. One of them knew that the Fallen Lands had a simple way of writing with raised dots, and they used it to correspond with each other and to record their knowledge. To be honest, one of them had the idea for using the Glenivere as a tool and not an instrument. Your archive is all the writings of sorcerers blinded in the war? That's amazing. Some of them were among the best, weren't they, and no one else wants them? Generally, some archive or museum often does claim the works of the most famous ones and transcribe them, Alfred said, much to my chagrin. But sometimes it isn't the very best sorcerers who have the best ideas. Usually those get tossed aside. Makes sense, Livonia said, and against her best instincts, she was even more enthralled. Random treasure hunting was already intriguing, but building an archive of neglected knowledge was perhaps the most alluring occupation she could imagine. When did you even start collecting them? If you really want to know. George looked back at them quickly and made the tiniest groan. When I was 10, Alfred began. This story does not need to begin that far back, George said. That was the year Papa said I could go anywhere I deemed safe, Alfred said, ignoring George, which, as far as I was concerned, was anywhere. I didn't care if I was bruised to hell back then. Anyway, as I learned the neighborhood, I eventually ended up at the library. I'd heard they had some audio resources, but when I talked to the archival librarian, she showed me a few of these books. They have a few collections from prominent sorcerers. She told me that she had, in fact, learned Braille telepathically, but that it was a pain in the ass as far as she was concerned, so she never read them. No one did. Ooh, was there anything good in them? He nodded. Fascinating stuff. An intimate look at what was going on during the war and how sorcerers were collaborating with Lord Jaron. I asked where they came from, and she said they came from estates. I learned all about estate sales and the artifacts and antique business and approaching families to buy their collections, worldwide bookseller contacts. You have worldwide bookseller contacts? I have worldwide everything contacts. Trading magic is my business, after all. There were hundreds of guys in the Order of the Arcane Hand, and many of them have since died. Others are very reclusive, but I would love to collect all their papers before they're lost. So did your grandfather leave the Colonites because of that? Oh no. Grandfather was a Colonite to the end, but my father is more pragmatic. He thinks honorable suicide is stupid. And in general, I think it takes a con man to know a con man, and he sees Lord Jaron as just another power-hungry sort, not a lofty sorcerer who speaks to the fates. You must know Atlantis is changing if your uncle is working for Det Ariani. He says it is. It's an exciting place to be in the last 10 years especially, wouldn't you say, George? Oh yeah, George said. The music scene alone. By the way, Alfie, I almost forgot, but I was talking to Darren and his brother has a drum kit he wants to sell. George, I mean, if you want drums, we can afford new drums. I said that wasn't really the issue. You know what? We'll talk about this later. Blora? Livonia, she insisted, gazing out the window as they passed through another town. This one seemed more prosperous. The street lined with two-story homes and George slowing down not to spook the horses. She even spotted a motor-driven tractor in the fields. I'm curious about your life here, Alfred said. Have you really not been to Avalon, not even once? I've never left for Nana, she said. It's really not that unusual. My grandmother has never left for Nana either. My mother was the strange one for heading off to study magic formally. Did you ever know her? He asked more gently. No, she left to rescue my father right after I was born. He was a prisoner of the Colonites. They were both killed when she tried to free him. I really hope no one I knew had anything to do with it. He frowned. I don't know what the connection is with my grandfather and your mother. Neither do I, but then, I know so little about them. Most of it I have to imagine. Maybe you'll end up stumbling into some answers. Atlantis is that sort of place. I'd like to pay my uncle a visit, she said. I've never met him in person. The more she felt for Nana receding into the background, the more excited she grew. It was time to meet her father's only brother. Time to see the world. Chapter 10. Thank you for visiting Avalon. Whoa, Livonia breathed as they drew near to Avalon. This was beyond anything she imagined. Even from the road, as the white spires loomed in the distance, she could sense the ancient magic in the city's bones. Ramshackle but brightly painted wooden houses ran up the hills, vines spilling down the sides of structures from rooftop gardens. Avalon had plants occupying nearly every empty space. The spires rose behind the houses like they had sprung from an unearthly realm visible everywhere, reaching for the clouds far above. This was the ancient seat of the religion of Valamir, the goddess of the Miralem, and no picture could have prepared her for the scope of its famous towers. The war had left this city untouched, protected on all sides by mountains and the armies of Lioness and Otare. George, before we go to the airport, we have time to ride her around the grove and the lake, don't we? Alfred suggested. We can't have you just breezing through without seeing the best parts. Could we? Livonia's skin had broken into goosebumps. She hadn't expected the world to seem so big, so grand, so strange. She hadn't expected to feel like she could breathe more deeply, like she was free for the first time. The street broadened into a boulevard lined with huge trees as they drove into the heart of the city. Here nearly all the traffic was motor cars and streetcars, with only a handful of carriages, and electric streetlights and power lines showed how the city had modernized. But it hardly felt modern at all. The The seminary of the priestesses and priests of Valamir wrapped all around the lake, and the sun was beginning to set, casting the white towers in gold, mirrored by their reflections in the calm waters. "It's so much more beautiful here than I imagined. I should never have listened to Uncle Fravel," she said. "I should have followed my mother's footsteps. Not to fight, but to enjoy what she fought for." "There's no better time to start," Alfred said, grinning as if this was what he planned all along, just to travel deep into the woods and find her and coax her out into the wild world. "The sunset's something else here on an autumn day," George said. "The clarity of the air. If we had more time, we really should have gotten some of those apple fritter things they sell here. Or, hey, Alfie, you know what this looks like? The way Ruslavin tastes. The most perfect autumn. We just never get days like this in Atlantis." "Ruslavin and sausage and apple pie," Alfred said wistfully. "Someday." "I make a good Ruslavin," Livonya said. It was one of her favorites, actually. Winter squash whipped with butter and baked in a crust of nuts and smoked maple sugar. It was usually only served on feast day, and she could eat it all herself. "You are a dangerous woman, Ballora," Alfred said. "Damn it, Livonya." "Oh, I give up," Livonya said. "You can call me Ballora if you really can't help it." She was almost starting to like it, even if it is a little misogynist. "It just means you—" "Oh, I know what it means," she said. "Do women have an equivalent they can call you?" "No." "And if I was old and ugly, you'd call me Madia, wouldn't you?" "Probably not. I like older women." "What if I had a husky voice?" "Your voice is a little husky," he said. "A little husky and a little bossy. I bet you'll make a fine older woman." She turned hot. "You Atlantean men are so slick." "Well, I can't deny that," he said. "In most cases." He patted George's head. "I would ask Bran out," George muttered, "if I wasn't so busy taking care of you." "I'll give you next week off, and I expect a report," Alfred said. They looped around the sacred apple groves which grew on an island on the lake. Only the priestesses were allowed to cross the bridge to tend and pick the apples. It was apple season now, so Livonia saw a few women in their blue robes filling baskets even now in the dusk, and she stared at them like they were minor deities themselves. For Nana rarely even received a visit from a priestess, nor did they have a temple. The local tribesmen pitched a bonfire every new moon and full moon, attended by one of their shamans, and that was good enough for everyone. Livonia rarely went. It was a little too much half-naked dancing for her. Having shown off the heart of Avalon, the sun was going down, and they headed for the airport. Large buildings were under construction outside the core of the city with huge machines lifting beams. The road turned wide and went up above the little ramshackle houses. This was just as surreal as the old spires in a different way. "The road is elevated." "It's a highway," George said. "You can finally get to the airport faster, and you know they're having the People's Tournament here in 72. "The what?" "That's right," Alfred said. "It's the first People's Tournament in Amiralem City. All the best warriors of all the fighting arts gather to compete in every discipline you can imagine. They usually start building new arenas years ahead of time. You'll get a lot of tourists, even in Fernana, I bet. Good thing I got that treasure out of your ruins before someone else blew in." "It was there for 800 years. Somehow I think it would stay," Livonia said. "It only takes one." They reached the airport after slogging through a traffic jam, but while George seemed to find this irritating, Livonia was fascinated, even by traffic. The airport was sleek on the outside, a white building shaped almost like a bird's wing, vaguely reminiscent of Avalon's famous spires. She gaped as an airplane rose up at a diagonal behind the structure, smoke pluming out behind it. At this point, she was too overwhelmed to do more than stare silently. "What is that smell?" she asked as they walked inside. George had dropped them off so Alfred could get tickets while he put the car wherever the car went. "It's the smell of an airport," Alfred said. "They all smell like this." "But what is it? Is that what airplanes smell like?" "The airplanes are all outside." He sniffed thoughtfully. Maybe it's new carpet. I bet you've never smelled new carpet before." "I certainly haven't." The ground rumbled. Alfred took a step, but she hung back, alarmed by the depth of vibration. "But is that the airplanes?" "Yes, that is an airplane taking off," he said, "and a new jet at that. The engines are loud." "Is a jet a particular type of airplane?" She was starting to get a little jittery about the idea of getting on one of these things. "They're safe these days, aren't they? I remembered hearing that they crash a lot, and it's hard even for telepaths to get control of them." They are extremely safe, but I have a teleportation stone, he said. If we go down, grab my hand. We're bailing. He added, let me get these tickets, Blora. Then I'll tell you all about planes. You'll feel better if you know how they work. He turned back to the counter, tapping his cane in an arc as he walked there, careful of other people hurrying by with their luggage. She felt like she ought to help him, but he seemed confident without help. She didn't mind just having a moment to take it all in. The airport felt like another universe. The lights were bright as day, the building so vast and open. What was all this space even for? People were flowing through it, carrying bags or pushing around racks with multiple bags, everyone dressed up and excited. She was dressed more like an older woman in her homemade blouse, her simple felted coat that Ome made for her 5 years ago, and a wool pinafore dress that fell past her knees. George joined them, and they walked to the gate, and then they sat to wait, and Alfred told her all about airplanes, explaining terminology like he really enjoyed this sort of thing, and making an airplane wing shape with one hand, while his other hand became the air lifting the wing. She could see that he related to the operations of the plane based on the shape of it, and imagined him having an airplane toy as a child. He was probably a curious kid who asked a lot of questions. She noticed again that he had very nice, expressive hands, and she noticed George noticing both of them. He gave her a look that said, yeah, I know what's going on here, and I'm not saying a damn word. Chapter 11, Pearl and Paisley. The flight landed late in the evening on a clear, dry night that seemed to bring the northern air with it. Livonia should have been exhausted by this time, but it was all too exhilarating, and Alfred reassured her about turbulence and strange noises and told her all about weather patterns and flights. A woman in a short pale blue dress brought them a chicken dinner on a little tray, and she had a glass of wine. Atlantis was a sprawl of glittering light. She was shocked by how many electric lights a city could have. They emerged into much warmer air, breezy but not cold. George picked them up outside the terminal in a car identical to the one they left behind. They cruised across a wide bridge and then down a narrow street lined with seedy little shops beneath 4 and 5 stories of what she guessed to be apartments. Strings of white lights illuminated the fronts, and their signs advertised fortunes, shape-shifting, and hypnosis. There were also quite a lot of noodle shops and places to buy pipes and tiralem to smoke. For the first time in her life, Livonia saw Finarlem, the lifelike doll people that the Darmons created for slave labor and as playthings for the rich. The Darmons had long believed that only weak souls could be summoned into Finarlem bodies, but Uncle Fravel had told her this was a horrible lie. Many Finarlem had escaped to the Miralem lands, but they stuck to the border cities away from the tribes. The tribesfolk believed that artificial beings with souls were an affront against the goddess. Livonia had only seen photos of them, and found them unsettling even though most of them looked quite lifelike these days. She tried not to stare at the few they passed on the street. They might have been prostitutes, judging by their skimpy outfits and the loitering on street corners. This is the telepathic district, by the way, Alfred said just after they crossed the river. The telepathic district? Do the Halnari live here? The Halnari were the traitor Miralem who had aligned themselves with the Darmons through centuries of wars against their own kind. They had profited greatly from this arrangement, selling their telepathic skill in return for becoming the richest kingdom in the world. Regular Miralem despised them, but Livonia was rather curious to gawk at a Halnari, especially since some of them still wore old imperial fashions, shape-shifting their faces and bodies and dressing in trailing robes. Actually, quite a few regular Miralem have settled here, Alfred said. You only need a little telepathic skill to make good money in these parts, so a lot of refugees came down after the war. This isn't the nicest part of town, though. You want to stay away after dark, and maybe even before dark. A painting on the side of a building caught in the streetlights grabbed her attention as they drove by. It looked for all the world like the man her uncle was working for. Like folk art of Det Ariani with a slightly out-of-proportion body marching forward with a book levitating just above one outstretched hand and crowds of very poorly drawn people reaching for said book. The word truth was emblazoned beneath him. What is that mural all about? She asked. Det Ariani came from here, George said. He's a local hero, so you see him everywhere. Some people feel like Lord Jaron is just a pack of lies and Det's the cure. Some of them are trading one cult for another, Alfred said. But Det has interesting ideas, and I'm not sure he meant to start a cult, whereas Lord Jaron definitely did. From the telepathic district, we'll be on Horan Street, and we'll stop and get you some clothes before I take you home. It's better if you fit in a little more before you encounter my family. Are clothing shops still open? Livonia guessed it was at least 10 o'clock by now. In this area, sure, George said. Those kids gotta party all night and get their emergency outfits if they can't get into the club. A party club? As if noodle shops and murals of debt and electric lights weren't enough, now the buildings were getting fancier. The lights were brighter. The crowds grew downright thick. Everything was busy and lively, doors thrown open to the night air. Illuminated stairwells led down into basement shops and canals under the roads. George whipped down a side road to grab a parking space. Yes, party. Have you never heard of a party in Fernana? George asked. I've heard of parties. I just don't really know anything about anything. She faltered as George jumped out and opened her door. Loud, almost violent music was competing from several directions. The smell of food was delicious enough to make her stomach growl. Something was rumbling under her feet as she stepped out, and warm air whooshed from grates. That's the subway, Alfred said. But we had better hurry. The clothing shops do close by 11, I'm sure. What do you think, George? Cecilia likes to shop at Pearl and Paisley. He cut himself off. George studied her like he had never considered her appearance all this time. I guess that's okay. She's dressed very traditionally, and her hair is in braids to her waist, but the Mystic girls are wearing it like that again anyway. I don't care if it's out of fashion. Long hair is superior, Alfred said. Oh, well, tell the fashion mags, George said. Dear girls, please grow your hair to be superior. Love, Guy with Hair Fetish. Oh, you want to get into fetishes. You want to go there, future Mr. Cherry Doll. Alfred elbowed him, and they briefly got in a jabbing match. Then George was leading the way, Alfred falling back with her. I don't have a fetish, he added to her. I mean, unless you count 500 sculptures of feet. You'll see them at the house. He got her laughing at that, even through her nerves. It's okay. I might have a hand fetish, she said, and he looked unduly pleased, like he knew he had nice-looking hands, which left her entirely flustered. Who is Cecilia? She asked. She had not forgotten that name. I've been in an arranged engagement for years, he said. Our fathers are business associates. We've known each other in some fashion our whole lives. Is this like the curse removal? Something they're imposing on you and you'll go along with? Well, how old are you again? He looked startled, then laughed once. You're so blunt. Well, I won't be here very long, will I? There's no point in dancing around. I have nothing to lose in pointing out that it seems like you intend to alter your entire perception against your instincts, marry a woman you don't love, and... Oh, your parents don't like the treasure hunting either, do they? He opened his mouth to retort, then stopped and just smiled. Things are different here. Clearly, Livonia certainly didn't see a soul who resembled her, and she attracted stares. The girls had short hair and short skirts, and the men had even shorter hair, like Alfred and George, and suits and ties, although often more colorful ones. There was nary a flowing-haired tribesman, a long tunic, or a homespun garment in sight. She had never seen such crowds. Most of the people moved faster than her little group, parting around them like water, a great sense of energy like she had never experienced. A few girls, laughing, hurried downstairs into a den of thumping music and colored lights called Go-Go Earth. Is that a club? She asked George. That's a club, he said. They play the latest records from the Fallen Lands there. Let's get you some clothes first, Alfred said. First? I don't mean to go there, first or second. They had reached the Pearl and Paisley, and she still couldn't believe the clothing shop was busy at such a late hour, or just how many clothes were packed into the small, narrow store. Livonia made all her own clothes, usually working on them during the long winter nights. She would buy a freshly bespelled auto needle at the general store in the autumn to do the straight seams, but she hand-sewed all the tricky bits, and it took months to make a few new outfits. The girl at the counter was lounging against it, lithe and bored, talking to a man who matched her aesthetic, a cigarette hanging from his lips while a record spun behind her. And here, too, the music was loud but slow and hazy, like dreams and smoke warped into sound. Pick whatever strikes your fancy, Alfred said. But you will be meeting my mother, I'm sorry to say, and it would be preferable not to provoke too much comment. George will advise, even though I don't trust him. I hardly know where to begin. How do I know what will fit me? They come in different sizes, George said. It really didn't take Livonia long for a dress to sing out to her, as if from the catalog of her dreams. It was a dark purple, dark blue, and bright blue pattern that looked like big swirling flowers with romantic bell-shaped sleeves and a white collar edged in lace. The skirt was certainly shorter than anything she had ever worn. George saw her looking at it and nodded. "Take a few sizes into the dressing room and see what fits," he said. "She probably needs some stockings with it," she heard him telling Alfred as she took the clothes behind a curtain. Livonia puzzled over the dress a moment. She knew what a zipper was, but she had never seen one before, and it took her a moment to figure out what to do with it. "They must think they pulled me from some lost tribe, and it's nearly true." Thankfully, the first dress she tried was a perfect fit because when she had struggled the zipper up her back, she wasn't sure it would ever come off again without help. She pushed back the curtain and felt an unexpected yearning to know Alfred's opinion, and she couldn't get it. George just nodded. "Fine." Luckily, the couple behind the counter provided unexpected backup. "Oh, Chickie, that is darling on you," the girl said. "Spot," the man agreed with what seemed like approval. "Good enough for me," Alfred said. George tossed a package of cream lace tights on the counter, and Alfred opened his wallet. "Are you going to buy her shoes?" the girl demanded, walking over to a shelf of them. "And what about a coat? It'll get cold tomorrow." She patted Livonia's arm. "I don't know what little forest you came out of, but your companions seem hopeless." "They're from the families, babe," the man said, looking at them like he would prefer not to be murdered until he finished his cigarette. The girl ignored him and chose shoes for Livonia, shiny blue with small gold buckles and wide 1-inch heels. They weren't that comfortable, but they could be worse, and now she fit right in when they walked back onto the street. As for coat, she would only take the plain black one. Buying a fancy coat seemed too much. "After all that, we really better head home," Alfred said. For the first time in a while, she considered why she was actually here, to lift the blindness curse and then go home. "It doesn't seem right," she thought. "I like him as he is. Of course, I'd probably like him any which way. That's the problem, isn't it? And my mother saw fit to blind his grandfather for reasons I don't even know. That just can't be good." Chapter 12, Behind the Gates. Livonia settled back onto the leather seat. Her new dress wasn't even long enough to fully sit on, and despite the tights, it felt a little racy. But she didn't hate it. Everything around her was glittering and pulsing. The very street rumbled and shook with the subways and the music. Her scalp was tingling. Her skin was electric. "Now to the family home," Alfred said. "Most people would agree that my father is the third-ranked boss in Atlantis. I'll try my best to shield you from him, but just brace yourself. My grandfather was a villain, my father is a jerk, and hopefully I'm just the guy who can't stop calling you Ballora. Thank you for the honest warning, so I suppose I should be on my best behavior. If you have bad behavior, by all means, just hold it in reserve." "Probably best to stay quiet," George said. "I never come out of a conversation with the fathers feeling better." "Luckily, you are the savior of the realm," Alfred said, "so they'll probably welcome you, although I have been accused of being an optimist. But I also have good luck, don't I, George?" "It's true," George said. "Once he tripped over money in the street. It was a coat with money in the pockets, and I didn't trip, I stepped on it. Whenever you tell a story about me, you don't have to say I tripped." "It's not my fault if you trip a lot," George said. "Then, actually, maybe it is. I guess I should protect you a little better. You are better company than you are a bodyguard." They were driving past houses now with elegant tiled roofs over brightly painted eaves. Stone walls with arched balconies rose over walled gardens where the flowers of summer were still hanging on. The road had passed over a few canals, smaller waterways that led off the river where low-slung boats cruised under the bridges. This part of the city had a leisurely pace, an air of old money. She remembered something she wanted to ask him. "Do you have any Miralem blood?" she said. "Could you sense it?" he asked. "Yes, I thought I did. When you first showed up, your defenses were stronger than I would expect." "My mother is half Miralem," Alfred said. "My father saw a wife with Miralem blood, so his children would have telepathy to fall back on if the curse was never lifted." "You mean your parents were married just to get telepathic blood in the family because of this blindness curse?" "I think they did actually like each other," Alfred said. "But yes." That certainly was not a ringing endorsement of his parents' romance. "Sounds very calculating." "Marriages are always very calculating here," Alfred said, and she sensed a sudden distance. He had a mask to wear here, and he had already warned her to find her own. I see, Livonia said. He's a rich Daramon, and I almost let myself trust him, but if that was something of his real self I saw back in Fernana, I probably won't see it again. But things are changing, he added, all at once it feels like. Even with my parents, I'm sure you won't like them much, but compared to Grandpapa, they're radicals. We haven't messed with the Fenarlum slave trade since Papa took over the business, and appointing me as his heir without finding a cure would never have happened 50 years ago. What do you mess with? Just magic, then? Yes, the same thing we have done for hundreds of years, he said with a hint of pride. We sell magical goods of all kinds. Some of them are illegal nowadays, but we keep ancient spells alive by keeping the market alive. George stopped in front of a wrought iron gate which slowly creaked open. He drove through up to the front of a beautiful house where vines trailed down from delicate iron balconies and roses bloomed in a lush garden. A fountain trickled in the center, the very sound of luxury. Livonia slid out of the car, and she thoroughly understood why she needed new clothes before they arrived. Alfred and George looked so polished and tailored, while she wondered if her plain braids and lack of makeup would still doom her. She was reminded just who he was and where he came from, that this was not a world she wanted to join. Chapter 13. Alfred Lord Tennyson. George pulled the car to the back of the house while Alfred led her to the front door, which opened on a wide entry room which had no apparent purpose except intimidating girls from small villages. Paintings of stiff, elegant people hung on the walls, and one little table sat to the side with a vase overflowing with flowers on it. The perfume of the flowers was overwhelmed by the smell of ancient wood and stone radiating from the thick walls and wide polished floorboards. A woman breezed in through one of the doors. She looked just like Alfred in refined female form, with the same black hair, heavy eyelids, and perfectly curved lips. Her close-fitting black skirt and jacket and neatly waved hair seemed too austere for her age. She was quite young and pretty, but she carried herself like she had already lived forever. "Welcome back, Alfie, darling." She lightly kissed his cheek and then turned to Livonia. "My dear, I am so sorry to drag you down here. I am just so grateful that you are willing and able to lift the curse. I hope we can give you a warm welcome." She gave Livonia a hug with surprisingly little physical contact. Livonia smiled politely. "It's been an adventure for me." "I suppose it would be, but it must be lonely up in Fernana. It's right in the mountains, isn't it? Let me show you to the guest room while Alfie goes to speak to his father. You must be exhausted." Alfred leaned close to her and said, "I'll see you as soon as I've spoken to Papa. We'll stay here for tonight since it's so damn late, but we'll go to my place tomorrow." "You could stay here longer," his mother said. "Thessia will be here tomorrow." Alfred's face was unreadable. "I need to check on some books at my apartment." "That boy and those old books," his mother said indulgently as he dashed up the marble stairs. "I'm Ellie," she added, putting a hand on Livonia's shoulder in a way that made her nervous. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just the intense power imbalance. Old wealth fairly dripped from the walls here. "I can't blame him. I like old books," Livonia said. "I do too, really. I named him after a poet from the Fallen Lands. Nor is it wiser to weep a true occasion lost, but trim our sails and let old bygones be. Such romance they have in a world without magic. All their magic has to come from words." "Is that it? I thought it was an unusual name. Where on earth did George come from?" "Oh, George was an English king. A few English kings, actually. A whole era of them. All the other children were named after English kings and queens. My other children are Victoria and Edward. Of course, George isn't really mine, but he might as well be, poor boy. His mother didn't stick around for hardly a day, but then that's all his father's fault. You won't be meeting him, I'm sure, but Galt is a man of few words and fewer sentiments." "Is English a place in the Fallen Lands?" "England, yes. Oh, I'll give you some novels and poems to read, and you'll see why I found it so romantic. The guest room is decorated in my best attempt at an English country house. Dad thinks it's too fussy, but you don't let a man decorate a guest room anyway." Alfred's mother seemed lost in a fantasy world while her husband ran his business. That tracked with what she knew of Daramon women. They were only good for raising kids, so when the kids grew up, they had to entertain themselves with anything they could find. Privately, Livonia had to agree with that about the fussiness. The room, papered in an elaborate pattern of pink poppies, was decorated to the last inch. A marble fireplace was arrayed with knickknacks and books, and the canopy bed had blue velvet ruffled curtains and ruffled bedclothes in a pattern of blue flowers on white. A desk looked out the window over the river beyond. the room illuminated with 2 matching electric lamps, with bases painted with sprays of flowers and wide fringe shades. "I know it's been a very long time, but I am sorry about your mother," Ellie said. "I don't know if Bravider had anything to do with her death, but if he did, I am deeply sorry. Know that we consider you an honored guest. Alfie's grandfather was a demon." "Alfred said as much," Livonia said. "He hated me. He hated all Marilyn, really. He always thought I was reading his mind, as if I would want to read that man's mind. He was an absolutely awful person. He killed himself to spite me, to be sure that my firstborn son would end up with the curse. It was entirely purposeful. I was playing with Alfie when he died, and I saw the light go out of his eyes. He started crying, and I was so helpless. We've been searching for you for so long, I never gave up hope." "That would be terribly upsetting. I certainly don't mind lifting this curse." Livonia couldn't help but feel for Ellie. It wasn't unusual for Daramon women to marry as young as 19 or 20. Livonia thought of young Rue and his imaginary dragon back home. He was one of many village children she had known since they were born. She had delighted with Sam Morell over playing peekaboo with him and watching him watch butterflies from his little pram. And if it was her own child, it would be devastating. Besides that, Alfred's mother was probably berated by this hard-hearted father-in-law while Alfred's father was at work. What power did a young Daramon wife have? It must have felt so personal for him to hurt your baby. "Yes, you understand." Ellie looked at Livonia almost desperately, as if being understood was not something she often experienced. "Fates, but I hate it when Alfie uses that cane. Drafen used to beat the servants with it. It all just seems like such an insult." But Livonia would also not soon forget brushing Alfred's mind when he asked her about the curse. "Alfred wouldn't think of it that way, though," Livonia said. "He doesn't remember his grandfather or being a baby, and I would imagine it's important to him that you see him as himself." "I will, once the curse is gone," Ellie said. Well, that about sums up this family dynamic, Livonia thought. She had a feeling they were all about to have it out when he got his sight back, but she would have done her part anyway. "I'm just glad it's nearly over. Now you try and get some rest. This is a wonderful book from England, since you like old books too." She handed her a cloth-bound red tome called Pride and Prejudice. "I hear that the translation takes too many liberties, but I adored it. I dare you not to fall in love with Mr. Darcy. One of the servants will rap on your door shortly with a nightdress and a cup of herbal tea, so you can get nice and comfortable." "Thank you for your kindness," Livonia said, and she meant it, although she felt as far from comfortable as possible. She stared out at the lights blinking on the river for a moment, then sat on the bed and opened the book. "It is a truth universally acknowledged in all sensible lands that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of some one or other of their daughters." Livonia frowned. What a very Daramon sort of book. Chapter 14, An Office Visit. Alfred charged up the stairs to the 4th floor, where his father held court in the office that would someday be Alfred's. The eldest son was lucky enough to inherit the family home and property. The eldest son was also unlucky enough to be under his parents' thumb until his father was killed or retired. Alfred had defied the traditional policy and gotten his own apartment, but he ended up spending much of his time here anyway. True escape was difficult. Thad Bravider ranked just behind the ostentatious, ruthless Kamare family and the Vorlands, who cultivated an air of mystery. Papa's style was accessible and friendly on the surface. Anyone who pissed him off quickly learned not to take that for granted, but Alfred almost never experienced that side of him. Alfred was his parents' favorite child. He hadn't asked for favoritism, but he knew it was true. With caveats, of course. His father stood from the desk when Alfred entered. Ice clinked in a glass he was carrying. "Welcome back. You want a tipple? Good work." Was she difficult to persuade? "Not especially," Alfred said in the very opposite of a cocktail mood. "But she's never left for Nana before. Her parents are both dead, and she has an uncle here somewhere, so I'm going to help her find him before I send her home." "Sounds like a good idea," Papa said jovially, taking a sip of his drink. "Your first treasure hunt with your sight back. Something to get you used to it before you do anything crazy, eh?" Alfred caught himself pulling one leather-bound volume out to trail his fingers over the ridges and shoved his hands in his pockets instead. Papa hated fidgeting. I would hardly call that a treasure hunt looking up a man's address, but yes, I have been wondering, do we know why her mother blinded Grandpapa? Oh, from what he used to say, the woman broke into the house. I suppose she was trying to steal some magic from him. They got into a fight in the basement. He had a telepath in his employ who attacked her husband, and he was trying to fight her off. Livonia's mother was a thief? What was she trying to steal? Does it matter? We have plenty of things worth stealing. Papa seemed ever so slightly annoyed that Alfred wanted more information. Is he hiding something about Livonia's parents? I'm trying to figure out why this escalated so much, Alfred said. An ancestral blinding curse isn't something you just toss off. And the telepath is the one who killed her father? She was one of those Halnari ladies. She was working for your grandfather in Woad. So this Halnari woman kills Livonia's father, and then Livonia's mother came after her for revenge, years later, Alfred noted. Grandpapa was blinded many years before Livonia was probably born. This sounds like they had a history, not just a couple of ruffians trying to steal some loot. Papa sighed. All right, I'll tell you the story Papa told me. Laren Raihessen was a spy and a smuggler. I take it he was part dry and he could pass for a Daramon. The dry look very similar to the marsh folk if they spend too much time in the sun. He was helping Finarlem girls to freedom. Slaves, then, Alfred said. Woad's girls? Well, I see why you wouldn't want to tell me. Don't you go telling Thessia this story, Thad said with a groan. Why was it no surprise that all this trouble started with Woad? Ankin's son Stefan was Thessia's father. The notorious Ankin and Alfred's grandfather had been good friends. If Alfred Bravider was a tyrant, Woad was worse. Of all the wealthy men of Atlantis in the heady years before the war, Woad was especially notorious for his Finarlem slave girls. Sometimes you could still find an old man who would whisper a fond word about those depraved parties, and those were always men to avoid in the future. Are you telling me that these thieves actually came to Atlantis to free Woad's Finarlem girls? Alfred said. Livonia's parents were risking their lives to help the women that Stefan's father tortured. I mean, that's how things were back then, Papa said. I just don't want you talking about it to this Miralem girl and Thessia and bringing up some old scandal. It's better we forget all about all that, especially with such a bright future ahead. I'm not trying to bring up a scandal, Alfred said, but I do think Livonia deserves to know that her parents were heroes. They didn't succeed, Papa pointed out. Livonia doesn't even know her parents, Alfred said. While you two are so caught up in this curse, I think we could spare a little sympathy for her. I suppose she won't talk about it, Papa said. It's Thessia I worry about. Sometimes she seems to forget that's her own family she's talking against when she starts going on about justice and so on. That's all over now. I divested from the slave trade the minute I took over this business, but we wouldn't be where we are if not for Ankin. That's the uncomfortable truth of it. When Grandpapa lost his sight, Ankin quietly ran a lot of his old friend's business for years to save face for Drafin. Over time, Drafin handed him complete control of his factory holdings. Thad and Stefan, the sons, grew up together and continued to work closely, although not without some tension. Stefan sometimes felt his family deserved more than they'd been given for his father's hard work, while Papa was a little bitter that the family holdings had been carved up. With Alfred's marriage to Stefan's only daughter, Thessia, the families would officially be merged. The factories would be back under the Bravider name. The tension would melt away, in theory. Alfred and Thessia's first son would inherit it all. But Alfred had never trusted Stefan. Thessia trusted her father even less. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with the factory holdings, which were still entwined with Finarlem slave labor. Alfred planned to give her control over them so she could dissolve them, unionize them, or whatever solution suited her. Neither of their parents knew this was their intention, and for all Papa's talk of divesting, Alfred suspected this was mostly because he lost the factories. There was no financial benefit to having Finarlem in the primary business of dealing potions. Alfred didn't even dare think too deeply of Thessia at the moment. He felt awful for brushing her off as just an arranged marriage, and yet the truth comes out when the walls close in. Curiosity sated, Papa asked, clapping Alfred's shoulder. Now, I do have to warn you, when you get this curse lifted, you can't spend all your time poking around that library. There isn't much time for reading when you're running all of this. I'm not quite done with my interrogation. Alfred sidled over to the drink cabinet, trying to ignore the tension in his stomach. How did you find her? Stefan gave me the tip, Thad said. And where did he? You'll have to ask him. He's been searching for the solution to this for all these years, too. Oh, of course he has. Alfred couldn't help a little sarcasm entering his voice. Everyone just wants to see you reach your full potential. You're nervous, of course, but it'll pass, Papa said. If I was prone to nerves, would I do all the crazy things I do? Alfred opened the ice bucket and filled a glass. He skimmed the Braille labels on the bottles and decided on whiskey and soda, nothing too strong. Papa taught him to make cocktails when he was 14, per tradition. When boys were still too young to join the conversation, their first invitation to the halls of men was as bartender, so they could listen to their father do business. But in the long term, Papa sighed. Your mother and I try not to undermine your confidence, but the fact is, you're at a severe disadvantage. Obviously, it has not escaped my notice that I have to prove myself more than the other guys, Alfred said icily. But you still named me as your heir, even when you thought the curse would never be removed. Now I know why you keep telling me to manage the casino boats and stay away from the buyers. You never intended to trust me with anything really important, did you? Not unless... Alfie, my father was blind, and I saw how hard... I am not some stubborn old man who took a blow to his pride and hardly left the house. If there's a way, I find it. I fight for everything. I haven't gotten this far being coddled. You're stubborn in your own way, Papa grumbled, and both of you would be better off putting some of that aside. When Alfred left his father's office, George was waiting outside, patient and loyal as ever. More than that, George felt like a relief right now. Alfred felt a pang of guilt for keeping any secret from George. He wanted so badly to tell him he'd already sabotaged the curse removal, but he was positive Livonia would read George's mind. What does it even matter, Alfred wondered. They'll blame it on her when it fails. I figured I'd just send her home, and who would care if they stewed over it? But now, I don't want to send her home. Not yet. Not for a little while. The plan was wrecked. He couldn't lie about the curse without causing trouble for Livonia, and that no longer felt acceptable. Georgie boy, I need to talk to you, Alfred said. Uh-oh. What did you do this time? One for my greatest hits, I'm sure. Alfred opened the door to his old bedroom. It was still arranged in the same way as ever, but Alfred had taken all of his books and artifacts, the swords that used to hang over the fireplace, and basically everything interesting. He opened the doors to the balcony, letting in cool night air and a vigorous wind. I sabotaged the curse, he said. You took one of those spells from the safe, George said. Did you know? Nah, of course not, but you know where they're kept. As soon as he came back to the table at the fish market looking so pissed off, I wondered if you'd think about it. Damn, that stuff burns, doesn't it? Remember that swindler guy screaming? It wasn't pleasant, but it doesn't linger. So that was a few days ago then. Any regrets? Regrets feel irrelevant, if that makes any sense. I've never been afraid of change. This felt more like self-preservation. I don't know if it's rational, but I have no one to ask. Like Livonia said, almost no one loses their sight as an infant and can't be cured for over 30 years. Alfred occasionally brushed up against a bottomless sense of isolation. He didn't know any other blind person, but if he did, they were likely to have a very different experience. Ancestral curses were rare enough as it was. I think it would just be weird, George said, flopping on the bed. Anyway, somehow I knew this wasn't going to happen. This was the most typical and perfect George reaction. How are you going to handle it when Livonia can't lift the curse? I wasn't going to tell you. Alfred crossed his arms, leaning in the doorway. The traffic of Atlantis never stopped, even past midnight. They would blame her. I'm not sure how far it would go. Mama would stew over it forever. But now, George suggested, she wants to look up her uncle, and you want to, well, you sure want something. So does she, that's obvious. I've never seen love at first sight before. And I guess I still haven't. Hey, if only your fighting skills were as good as your jokes. Wait, they are. I only work for men equal to me. If only your driving was as quick as your wit. Seriously, though, what are you going to do? I always figure out something, Alfred said. Confident answer. I like it. You could throw out some ideas, Alfred said, sitting on the bed beside him. Alfie, dark curses. You want ideas from me? Well, now I'm terrified for you. You know the only idea I've ever had. Just leave the damn business. And what, live under a bridge? Well, we know how to set up all sorts of tents now. We learned a new canned bean recipe. Your elegant hobo life is waiting, he said, parroting the commercial for a beachside resort hotel. George had been conceived to be a Santaroon. Santaroons were supposed to have children around the same time as their boss, so they could grow up together. Galt Willen paid a woman to give him a son, and as soon as the contract was fulfilled, she got the hell away from him. Unfortunately for Galt, that son was George, an inherently sweet boy. Once they reached adulthood, Alfred had told George he didn't have to stay, but it was a hollow offer. He knew George wouldn't leave, and he never did. Alfred grimaced and went to check on Livonia, leaving George to probably fall asleep on his bed and stick Alfred with the sofa. I just wanted to check on you, he told her. Do you have everything you need? Did my mother traumatize you in any way? She wasn't that bad. She seems a little lonely. So, in the morning, we're doing this? He shook his head. I took a parasitic blindness spell just before I came to visit you. What? You mean this whole time from the moment you showed up at my door, I could never have lifted the curse? You can do my future offspring a favor, but you can't fix me. So you let me berate you, and meanwhile, you had already done this? They won't get angry at me, will they? I'm telling them what I did in the morning, and when the dust and smoke settles and the flames die down, I'll take you to meet your uncle. Oh, good luck with your mother. Don't I know it, he muttered. I must be crazy. From what I've known of you so far, you seem a little crazy in multiple directions. Certainly she must be used to it by now. That does seem to elude her somehow. Do you mind if I come in for a minute? I found out a few things about your parents. Of course. Now she sounded eager and flung the door open. The guest room smelled of rose perfume, and he went to crack the window to get a little fresh air. Do you know how your father died? He asked. No, I don't. Thessia's grandfather, Enkin, used to be well known for having a rotating caste of Finarlem concubines, Alfred said. If my grandfather was a cruel man, Enkin sounded completely immoral. Whatever you've ever heard about how these women were treated, Enkin was all of that. Apparently your parents were trying to rescue them, probably to get them to safety in the Miralem lands. It was a heroic and selfless act. I heard he was tortured and captured first, and my mother went to try and save him. Yes, it seems he got into a fight with the Halnari telepath that the grandfathers had hired, while your mother was fighting my grandfather. I guess she escaped and he didn't. She took a deep breath. No one has ever told me what they were up to before. Not my uncle, not my grandparents. No one talks about them. I've been on my own my whole life. With family, of course, but I'm not like them. I've always felt so restless. Then you show up, and now I don't know if I can ever go home and feel like it's enough. I want something more. How could you not be lonely, not knowing anyone like you? She paused. Do you ever feel like that? Yes, he said. Very much so, if I let myself think about it. So do you try not to? This is a very penetrating interview. Sorry, I just wondered. I feel like you're a different person around your family. Vulnerability is a dangerous thing in this world, he said. The better you can control your emotions, the more likely you are to control everyone else's as well. But your own family. You know where you are, Ballora. I love my parents, but my first job is to prove myself worthy of succeeding them. And that job is about to get a lot harder tomorrow morning. Chapter 15, The Uneaten Breakfast. A maid woke Livonia up with a gentle knock, a cup of coffee, and a warm towel. She had never experienced a hot shower before, like having a private steaming waterfall. She changed back into the same dress and was relieved to see Alfred and George hanging out in the hallway waiting for her so she didn't have to venture downstairs alone in this imposing house. Alfred also looked freshly showered and had one little wet spike of hair going the wrong way from his part. She desperately wanted to fix it, but as soon as they reached the bottom of the stairs, a girl rushed up to him and did it herself. Then she kissed his cheek. Good morning, handsome. How was the trip? She smiled at Livonia. The girl was so stunning that she hardly seemed real, and Livonia reminded herself about shape-shifting. Unfortunately, part of what made her so stunning was also a natural, passionate charisma. She had a sweet smile and big, soulful brown eyes and a heart-shaped face with honey-brown skin. Her nose was slightly upturned and adorable. Her black hair was side-parted and her bangs swept long across her forehead. The ends of her hair were flipped up just shy of her shoulders. Her tight sweater, short skirt, and knee socks displayed curves that George seemed to appreciate. George definitely didn't look at Livonia like that. The trip was a good time. It snowed overnight. We slept in a tent, and I explored some local ruins. Imagine having snow this early in the year. I love snow, she said. And I brought back Livonya Orlestin. So nice to meet you, Livonia. I'm Thessia Woad. The girl bowed prettily, and Livonia nodded back. Nice to meet you, too. This is such a cute dress, Thessia said. I didn't know they had such fashionable things up so far north. We took her to Pearl and Paisley last night, Alfred said. Oh, she laughed. That explains it. I thought I almost bought one similar. It looks so good on you. Gosh, your hair is so pretty. Livonia wasn't sure how to respond to the most beautiful girl she had ever seen complimenting her. They really were not in the same class. George, are you going to the Cherry Doll concert tonight? Thessia asked. I don't know if I can, considering the other stuff going on, George said. I talked to Rajan and he can get us in. Well, the curse thing doesn't take too long, does it? Alfred, do you mind if George goes out tonight? Of course, you could come if you feel up to it. Livonia can come too. I might be up for it, Alfred said. You're in such a good mood, Thessia said. I thought you were going to be stressed over this. I'm in the mood to burn my life down and cackle over the flames, he said. Oh. Thessia's eyes widened. Alfred's parents entered the room. Thad was shorter and stockier than Alfred. He looked like he could brawl and love every minute, but there was a twinkle in his eye that probably helped him get away with a lot. Ellie was clutching her hands together. Let's all have a good breakfast and then we will proceed. We've already set things up. Thessia took Alfred's arm, so George fell back with Livonia in a gentlemanly way, shooting her one raised eyebrow of sympathy. They proceeded to a room with glass walls, potted flowers, and small citrus trees surrounding white wicker chairs with green cushions. 2 smaller tables had been pushed together to accommodate the family, as a young woman and boy were already there. Livonia guessed these were Ellie's other English king and queen. The girl looked to be in her 20s, still very youthful, but trying her damnedest to look older. She strongly resembled Alfred and Ellie, but her features were sharp as a knife, her eyes cutting, and in that way she seemed to take after Thad. She was wearing a turtleneck and slim trousers in stark black, her black hair swept back in a saucy ponytail. The boy was probably 12 or 13 and fidgety, shuffling a deck of cards until Alfred's mother turned her glower on him. I really think you kids should be careful at those Cherry Doll concerts, Thad said. They attract a lot of those debt supporter types, and it's getting too tense around here. I'll be glad when this rabble-rouser loses and goes back to being a second-tier actor like he deserves. Debt isn't a rabble-rouser, Thessia said, getting instantly heated. It's not his fault if people are protesting. It's not like he told anyone to cause trouble. But you have to ask, why are people so angry anyway? Do they have any other way to be heard in the first place? There is no excuse for that kind of violence, Thad said. University puts a lot of strain on a young woman, Ellie said, apparently implying that university was to blame for Thessia's outburst. But remember, you're there to study, and your law degree will do more good in the world than violence. Anyway, this is a very important morning. This family curse will finally be over and done with. Livonya Orlestin has graciously come down from the north to end this blight upon our family. This will be good for everyone, for our family standing in general, and Edward, straighten up. When you work for your brother, you can be assured, I think that someday, Alfred will be able to carry the Bravider name even higher. Oh, I'm sure of it, Thad said. When I think of how much respect Alfred has already managed to garner, even under these circumstances, I know this business will be in good hands. I wouldn't be surprised if our name surpasses the Vorlands. Ed, you heard your mother. Sit up straight. You guys are fooling yourselves, Victoria said, drinking something sparkly while gazing at the orange tree. Victoria, I swear, you and your brother used to be so close, and I don't know what happened. You can be proud of him for one day. She shrugged. I'll be proud if he doesn't embarrass me. We'll see. I just think he's still going to be extremely Alfred. I would certainly hope he's still extremely Alfred, Thessia said, spooning some sugared berries onto her plate. Luckily, only your crowd thinks there's something wrong with that. Should I just leave the table while you all hash out my biography, Extremely Alfred? Alfred asked sarcastically. Livonia, please eat. You'll need your strength for the spell, Ellie said, handing someone a plate of smoked fish to pass down to Livonia. For a moment, there was an anxious silence of everyone passing around food in earnest. It's not happening, Alfred announced. The platters and serving spoons all stopped wherever they landed. What do you mean? His mother gripped a knife, and George looked worried he might actually have to save Alfred from his own mother. What isn't happening? Her tone was clipped. You can't fix me. I took a parasitic blindness spell on Thursday. As he spoke, Ellie went white. A teapot shattered spontaneously on the table, spilling brown liquid everywhere. Elle, did you just snap your English teapot? Thad couldn't help but chuckle. Thad, did you hear what he said? He sabotaged the curse removal. Alfie, you didn't. Tell me you didn't. Thad's chuckling died down, and he also looked briefly in denial. That isn't funny, Alfie. Alfred threw up his hands. He had the air of a man who had decided he would face the hangman's noose with good humor. The next chapter of Extremely Alfred is going to be a doozy. This is no time for your little jokes. Why would you do such a thing? When I think of that man mocking me, going to his grave with a smile because he relished the idea of my son having to struggle with all of his trials. Ellie slumped onto the table, covering her face and clawing for a napkin. She sobbed into it. What the fuck were you thinking? Dad growled. This is the most short-sighted thing I can imagine. Just think when this gets out. Plus, you know that spell costs 1,500 elan wholesale. What are they going to think of you? All this just because you didn't want to take a few telepathic therapy classes? I thought you'd want to read a damn real book at least. You really think you're going to be able to carry this family when I retire? God's damn. Victoria lounged in her chair, looking rather pleased as she sipped her drink. Yes, I do think so, Alfred said, sounding on the edge himself. George started eating again when no one else was. Thessia put a hand on Alfred's arm, but she was glancing around anxiously. Livonia had never witnessed anything like this. Alfred didn't bother to explain himself, and he obviously couldn't try. They wouldn't hear it. Obviously, he already had a fiancé, and his life wasn't her business. But she couldn't seem to help it. She felt for him. She liked him. From the moment she brushed his mind and felt how interesting he was. And certainly he was more interesting by the moment. Even this, crazy or not, it had to take guts. The expectations on him seemed enormous. Ellie was now sobbing wretchedly. Thessia put a hand on her shoulder. Mama, she tried. You don't understand it yet, Ellie gasped, gently pushing her away. I think you'd better go, son, Thad said. Your mother and I need to have a serious talk. Great, you do that. Alfred stood up and George got up with him, grabbing one of the egg pastries and then a sausage that he carefully balanced across it. It's okay, Livonia. Come home with me, Alfred said, and with her the edge was gone. You too, Thess. The four of them left together as Victoria poured another glass of champagne. She held it up to them as they left. Compiara, big brother. Chapter 16. Searching for Uncle Fravel. Are we going to talk about how bad that was? George said after they had been driving for several long minutes. I think it was self-explanatory, Alfred said. Okay, well, let's see what's on the radio. Maybe you could just take me to my uncle, Livonia said. He lives at 13 Brick Street. I'm sure he can help me. It seems like you have a lot of other things to worry about. Then I'll be out of your way and I can finally meet him. Well, let's check on him, but I still owe you a trip back home, Alfred said, and she could tell he didn't want her to leave. George took a right turn, driving away from the river, and soon they were at an old shop front that was now the campaign headquarters for Det Ariani. Oh, I guess he gets his mail at the campaign office, she said, a little surprised. He said he changed apartments earlier in the year, but maybe his mail was getting stolen, George said. This isn't the best neighborhood. Livonia stared at the office, which had big plate glass windows hung with political banners. She didn't even know what her uncle looked like. He had never sent a photo of himself. Presumably he resembled her father, but she hoped her heart would know him. He seemed so distant despite all the letters. She hoped he would welcome her presence. It was quite possible that he never wanted to be responsible for her. He was a bachelor, after all, who never bothered to visit. I'll go in with you, Alfred said. She allowed this since Fernanda had neither political campaigns nor offices, and she had no idea if you could just walk into one and ask questions. I am sorry that you were witness to all of that, Alfred said. I still don't mind lifting the ancestral part of the curse one of these days, Livonia said. They forgot all about that, didn't they? He laughed. She opened the wooden door, which was etched with an old sign for a basket maker. Hello there. A Maryland woman with short blonde curls and a friendly but no-nonsense voice greeted them immediately. Come on in. Are you here for information, literature, volunteering? She was standing behind a table with pamphlets, posters, and banners, with a telephone, a radio, some newspapers, and a typewriter. The room was otherwise sparse but tidy, with a few plants and paintings on the walls. Livonia was still astonished to see all the objects she'd marveled over in catalogs just sitting around. Does a man named Riehessen work here? Fravel Riehessen? No. Are you sure? He's worked on the campaign since the beginning. The woman glanced at a door to her side. No, not familiar. A strange icy feeling slid down Livonia's back. Did her uncle not really exist? I mean, that's crazy. He has to exist, but why is he so hard to find? Did he not visit because he has something to hide? Are there other campaign offices where he might be? Alfred asked. I definitely know everyone who works the campaign. Is he a volunteer? No, I think he works on the financial side of things. He's written me many letters talking about it. Do you have one of the letters? I don't. If you could bring one, maybe I'd recognize his handwriting. Thank you. I'll try to bring in a letter then. How strange, the woman said. I'm very sorry. As Livonia stepped out of the building, the woman was picking up the phone. Livonia glanced back at her and she put the phone down, pretending to busy herself with something else. I think she's lying to me, she whispered. Curious, Alfred said. I do like a good mystery. An alien sense of anxiety rippled over her. I didn't realize how much I was looking forward to meeting him. I know so little about my uncle, and she had no idea who he was. I didn't want to go home without meeting him. He probably uses an alias because Det has enemies. We'll figure it out. I have a spare room. But you already have... Don't worry about my problems, he said. I'm fine. We'll go to my apartment. You can stay as long as you need to. We'll have more time to show you around and try and find your uncle. It's no problem. He sounded so calm. Livonia looked at his face, which no longer seemed so blandly handsome, but steady, full of good humor and fascination. And she wanted so much to pursue him. Chapter 17, The Apartment. Your uncle works for Det Ariani? Thessia asked Livonia when they returned to the car. Oh man, here we go, Alfred thought. Thessia's voice was still pointed toward the building. She was hoping to get a glimpse of the man himself. Working for Det's campaign would be like a dream, Thessia breathed. I don't know, Livonia said. He wasn't there and they didn't know his name. I bet he uses an alias, Thessia said. The cops have been rough on the protesters and there was an assassination attempt on Det already. She crossed her arms. And I think our fathers have been supplying them with the knockout potions to use on Det's supporters. I just haven't found the proof yet. If Thessia did find the proof, what could they do about it? Sometime in high school, Thessia's political awareness exploded, to a degree bordering on dangerous. She went to the Equal Pay March, to Det's now famous, infamous, their fathers might say, speech in the old amphitheater, and had a long list of businesses she refused to patronize, which was ironic when her father's business was on it. Everything Thessia owned and ate were paid for, in part, by Finarlem labor. Alfred and George were the only people who knew about her after-school activities, and she always swore them to secrecy. At first he found her passion to be cute and exciting, but now she was getting in so deep that trouble felt inevitable. So it's dangerous to work for his campaign? Livonia asked. Of course, Thessia said. They're doing everything they can to stop him. I'm sure you can find him some other way. In the meantime, we should all go to the concert tonight for sure. I just have to say that breakfast incident was satisfying to watch. Your parents were so mad. Curses or not, I don't care as long as you're happy, but I sure wish I could tell my father off like that. I hope you'll be as happy when they kick me out, Alfred said. But they have to keep me around. What choice do they really have? I can't see Papa ever trusting Vic or Ed. Thessia laughed. I'll learn to cook and everything. I'm glad you're taking it well. I know you and Mama have been close. You know I love your mother. She's so kind, but then so many hang-ups. Now she'll just have to get over it about your grandfather once and for all. Alfred had a hard time imagining his mother getting over anything. What else was she going to think about all day? Soon they were home, and luckily Alfred had been out of town all week, so it didn't matter that the cleaning lady wouldn't be by until Monday. He and George were definitely living the bachelor life for now. When Vaja took off a few weeks to have a baby, the apartment was infested by ants that George never found worth mentioning. He didn't want Livonia to catch him with a messy apartment. Her personality leaned toward tidiness, practicality, and steadiness. He had sensed that right away. They probably weren't the most romantic qualities, or at least they shouldn't be. They were the attributes of working women. His secretary, his cleaning woman, his favorite librarian. And admittedly, he had fantasized about all of the above at some point. Bessie immediately opened and shut the fridge with a huff. You two never have anything to offer guests. I have chocolate-covered hazelnuts in my room, George said. A big old bag. I mean drinks and stuff. What do you guys drink? Water, George said. From the tap? Bessie laughed. Oh, gee, okay. Well, I'm going to run down to the market and get something sparkly and some pastries. I'll go with you, George said. Alfie can figure out what to do with Livonia. Get me another case of Jazz Trio, Alfred said, and some of those little tangerines if they're in yet. Livonia, do you want anything? I would love a tangerine, she said, and she had moved halfway across the room while he was talking to Thessia. Oh, of course, she was looking at the television. Alfred supposed his apartment must be a pretty revolutionary experience to a girl from a northern Miralem village. Even his parents' house was built some 300 years ago, and in all that time the only real upgrades were electric lights and better plumbing. This penthouse apartment, on the other hand, was blazing new with all the mod cons: dishwasher, gas range and oven, electric refrigerator and freezer, television, stereo, recessed lighting that gave the entire space the perfect glow with the flick of one switch, so Alfred never had to wonder if he had forgotten to turn on the right lamp for his guests. It was furnished by a decorator in a style his mother said was a bit too avant-garde. Alfred hung his collection of swords over the sofa. A full wall of glass looked over an alley, which was a good way to save a buck since George was usually too busy staring at the TV or album sleeves to look at the view. They still let in plenty of warm sun on the rare day in Atlantis that actually had warm sun. Suddenly all he cared about was whether Livonia would like it. She was quiet except for her shoes making little taps. I know it's not your cottage in the woods, he said, because suddenly all he could think of was what was missing. That clear air, the rustle of wind in the trees and the soft clucking of chickens, the smell of wood smoke and stew, wooden furniture that felt warm and curved with cushions and woven tablecloths. It certainly isn't, she said, but, it does look like you. He hoped that was a good thing. And you have a place for me to stay? In my office. The sofa is comfortable. He showed her into the room, which was mostly the collection of Braille manuscripts he'd scoured the world for, with the afterthought of a desk with a typewriter and telephone. A suit of leather armor from the Somel period stood in front of the window, and a small shelf held curious magical artifacts that he rarely used but could be useful someday, like the spirit tone harp. Oh wow, are these all the books? It's more than I expected. Braille takes up a lot of space, so this isn't as much information as you might think, but these are only the useful ones. I put all the duds in some dusty old room in the warehouse. It's certainly a reminder of the toll the war took on the Daramon, she murmured, that enough men lost their sight to fill a room of books. We're still bitter that we lost, but it wasn't an easy win. Not at all. And this is the legacy of the 10,000-man sacrifice, of course. That spell is what made Daramons more difficult to kill. The 10,000-man sacrifice was the spell that made Lord Sharon famous, although thousands of sorcerers sacrificed themselves to cast it. It gave the blood of every Daramon some natural healing properties, and even briefly kept them alive through fatal injuries. Otherwise, tactics would never have shifted, and all these men would have died in battle, I imagine. Do any of these go back to the War of the Crystals? Alfred usually managed to keep his esoteric interests quiet, unlike George, who once pinned down the building super for an hour, explaining what a modular synthesizer was, but she was actually asking. Afraid not. There was no resistance to honorable suicides at that time, and no Braille either. You could capture voices in a crystal, but it was limited compared to all of this. Do you ever meet with these guys or work with them in your business? She asked. These guys? They're dead. I I mean the ones that are still alive, obviously. The war wasn't that long ago. No. Why not? Wouldn't you learn even more from them when they're still alive? Alfred hesitated. I have met a few, but working with them. Does this have something to do with your parents? She asked. This seems like a world they wouldn't want you getting too deep into. Damn it, Ballora, I didn't even have time to come up with a bullshit reason. That is exactly the trouble. Papa wouldn't want me to be known for that. She laughed. And I'm not even a trained telepath. Just imagine. Terrifying. They had both moved to the shelf, standing beside it together, not too close. If George and Thessia burst in, nothing would look suspicious. Were these books a factor in your decision? She asked, reading about all of their experiences. He didn't expect this question either. Yes, I think so, he said. Some of these books go into agonies of isolation and frustration, but then others express a certain sense of wonder as they notice sounds or changes in the air that they never would have before. Elemental sorcerers often found their skills improved, since working with elements is all about feel. The most adventurous among them always seemed to fare the best. It all made me think it wouldn't be that easy to go the other way either, and also that the best cure to this curse was adventure. She took a quick little breath. Adventure. I think this is my first one. I bet you'll be having quite a few if you've caught the bug. That quest for your uncle might be a little more of one than initially expected. And he was certainly glad of it. Chapter 18. The Doll Who Dominates. So, are we going out tonight? Thessia stocked the fridge with cans. Livonia, do you want a soda? What is that? Livonia stared at the abundance of bright packages pouring from the grocery bags. George ripped open a big bag of crispy potatoes like he was tearing off someone's head and dumped them in a bowl. Alfred punched a hole in a can of Jazz Trio, an espresso drink. I just got Nutley, Thessia said. That didn't answer my question at all, Livonia thought, but she decided the only way to learn the local culture was to try things. Is this what food and drinks are like here? Already made and all these colorful packages? Then, sure. The soda was indescribably strange and sweet, but the fizziness was refreshing. I'm definitely in for tonight, George said. You want to check out a club, Ballora? Alfred asked. Can I help you get ready? Thessia said excitedly, grabbing her purse. I could do your makeup. I'll make you blend right in. These guys better get you some more clothes, though. More clothes? You need to have a good wardrobe around here. I hope we can show you a good time, Thessia said, leading her to the boxy sofa. She took a bunch of little makeup containers out and spread them like an artist's tools. You have really nice skin, she observed, and Livonia caught herself glancing over to the kitchen to Alfred, wondering if he was listening and if he cared. Mortifying. She was turning downright stupid now. It really did make her wonder about her parents sometimes. Sure, maybe her dad was a hero and maybe her mom was brave and talented. But now that she knew how it felt to meet someone and have your brain explode like a firework, she could also imagine her parents doing some very stupid things. I think you could look a little like Patty Boyd, Thessia said. Who's your favorite Beatle? I like John. George is the best, George said. Alfred won't tell us who his favorite is, Thessia said. I don't know what... Thessia paused, as if she had suddenly realized the depths of Livonia's cultural isolation. Oh, they're a band from the Fallen Lands, although bands here play their music too. The Beat Four are pretty good. So, have you heard any Cherry Doll? Thessia asked, tickling a brush over Livonia's cheeks. I've never heard of Cherry Doll either. We don't have radios or record players or anything in Fernana. She's amazing, Thessia said, sighing. She's one of the only Fenarlum on the pop scene, and she just does everything so fearlessly. Honestly, her music is good, but she's my idol. Everyone at school is a little obsessed with her, even though they treat normal Fenarlum like trash. I've never seen a Fenarlum back home, Livonia admitted. Oh, wow, really? But you have lots of Fenarlum up north, don't you? Not in Fernana. I just found out that my parents died because they were trying to help Fenarlum, but about half the residents of my town are from the tribes, and they're hostile to the concept of creating people with magic. I'm a little surprised if Fenarlum could even be a pop star. I think her confidence takes everyone off guard and they can't help liking her, Thessia said, but it would be nice if they cared about other Fenarlum as much as they do Cherry Doll. I don't really know how anyone can live with themselves knowing how much of this world was built by torturing people. She brushed eyeliner across Livonia's eyelids, which couldn't help fluttering madly. Thesia is intense, Livonia thought. She had an admirable moral compass, but Livonia wasn't sure what to say when she was so removed from the situation. Soon Thesia had turned her into a startlingly glamorous person with prominent eyelashes and shiny pale lips. Now she had a weird sort of whiplash of being glad that Alfred couldn't see her like this. Who was this girl? It felt a little too far to be comfortable, but she would fit in. They crawled through traffic to the club. Canal boats glided past the crumbling white ruins of a huge palace that dominated the city center, taking up 2 whole blocks, with signs for the Anar Palace, entrance, tickets, event venue, and Cafe of the Gods. Tourism is a little more serious here, I guess, Livonia said. Yeah, you ain't going in there and banging on the stones, George said. Damn round-the-clock security, Alfred said. Massive newer buildings of glass and steel rose up nearby, some still being constructed with scaffolding and cranes. Mixed among the modern styles, plenty of Darmon still wore traditional clothes and hairstyles. She even saw the stiff looped braid that was fashionable for men before the war. But horses had been entirely replaced by motor vehicles, and the air smelled of fumes. Atlantis teemed with life and energy and a certain sense of danger, and if she stayed here, it would all be her business. She should know what mattered. Her uncle did. He came here to work for a better world. He has to be real. Someone wrote those letters. How many things did he lie about? For now, it felt good to be out with other people her age. Even Thesia. Could they ever be friends? Maybe not, but she was welcoming. Livonia felt like she could become someone suave and glamorous in no time. They walked a few blocks from their parking spot past crowds with the tantalizing food smells and clashing music tempos, just like their shopping expedition. Hello Melody was a brick warehousey building with a huge neon sign depicting 2 dancers, and all the doors and window frames were painted bright pink. A few girls were smoking cigarettes out front, and a line wrapped around the corner. I'll get us in, Thesia said, slipping away from them. Soon they were in, past the man taking tickets from the crowd in line. Livonia could hardly even put into words the feeling of slipping into the dimly lit club with brick walls and grungy floor. The air was electric with young people in striking clothes they had obviously chosen to show off to one another. They were drinking and watching the stage, waiting. The sense of something about to happen was palpable, and she had never tasted anything like it before. And it felt really good just to be here, her worries washed away. In this place, all that mattered was now. They ordered some drinks and found an empty table on the sidelines. Thesia parked her head in her palms, grinning as she watched the stage. George was nodding his head to the music playing in the background. A guy was putting records on off to the side. The stage lights came on and everyone snapped to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the doll who dominates the scene? The chameleon of the clubs, the powerhouse of popsters, the girl who's got it. Yeah, Thesia and George screamed back at the guy in the purple suit who had just grabbed the mic. The curtain slowly rose. The audience held their breath as it revealed a girl with her back to the audience. Her arms were spread with a cape that said Cherry Doll in red sequins. Now everyone screamed like a deity had descended to earth. Cherry Doll turned. She had a shock of unnaturally red wavy hair, big brown eyes, golden brown skin, and a teasing expression that looked like she expected every ounce of attention she was getting. She dramatically descended several stairs and prowled up to the microphone. She was wearing what was little more than sparkly silver underwear and thigh-high boots with platform heels that enhanced her petite stature. The music built into a pounding club beat as Cherry Doll slowly rubbed her hands down her torso and thighs. She had visible stitches on her arms and where her legs met her body, but looked real enough that George was riveted. Photos of Finarlem couldn't capture their souls that well, Livonia thought. In person, Cherry Doll seemed as real as anyone, but larger than life. George mumbled, and then started shoving his way to the stage. Thesia whispered to Alfred and then followed him. Alfred turned to her. Well, I think we just lost them for the rest of the night. Surfin' doll, you said I couldn't do it. Surfin' doll, boy, I'll put you through it. Cherry Doll sang huskily and with energy. It was impossible not to move to the song while her band slammed out a beat in the background. We're throwing you into it tonight, Alfred said, edging closer to her so she could hear him. I am definitely far from home, Livonia said, but I'm glad to be somewhere. You're not bored, huh? Every minute I'm here, I realize just how bored I was back home. But I'm not sure you can be bored until you know what it is not to be bored. Stick with me and you'll never be bored again, he said. I believe that, but I don't know how I could stay for too long. I'm sleeping on your couch. You have some magical skills, don't you? Barely. Do you think I'd really be useful to you? I can't make rare potions. My skills are honed for small town stuff, like goat diarrhea. He laughed. His smile was so unself-conscious, unlike his parents' smiles. She wondered if they disliked that about him, and bet they probably did. We could use you, he assured her. It's getting harder to find people who practice folk magic, so I expect you know more than you think. They don't even teach sorcery in school anymore. Really? We haven't been at war for decades. Why learn to throw fireballs? You always need healers, of course, but all the common potions are now just medicine, packaged up, made in a facility, same recipe every time. Feeling sick? Grab Helo quick, he sing-songed. Talk about boring. That is boring. That's why I poke around ruins, he said, and collect all those books. Are you really offering me work? She asked, tracing lines in the condensation of her beer. If you don't mind working for the families. Families, no, but I might not mind working for you, she said, as lightly as she could manage. Just so I can stick around here a little longer. But what would you have me do? I can make my healing spells, but they work best when I also have my garden. I need a good source of ingredients. Have you ever written down all your spell recipes and methods? I have many similar books written by Darmons, but Miralem don't have as much of a writing culture. I don't have any books that include spells from the far north. They're pretty simple. That doesn't matter. If we keep losing magic practitioners, even simple spells will be lost eventually if they're not archived. So much of it is intuitive. So is cooking, I gather, he said, but cookbooks are still a useful starting point. That's all you want? Well, we need an excuse to keep you around, don't we? He said. In the meantime, we'll look for your uncle. You're going to a lot of trouble for me. Livonia sipped the beer. She wasn't naturally trusting, or at least she didn't used to think so. You're not trouble for me, he said, sipping his own beer. I was trouble for you. Her cheeks warmed as she glanced toward where Thessia had disappeared into the crowd. Thessia seems nice. She is nice. It was not the tone of a man giddily in love. An arranged marriage. Is George watching out for her in this crowd? He asked. Yes, they're both right up front dancing together. That's good. They're both really into music. You're not into music? Oh, sure, the blind guy has to be into music. Well, I didn't mean it like that. I've actually never heard of being into music. Back home, music just is. You sing and dance at festivals, and people sing when they're working together for long hours, and no one's ever said they're into it or not. It's just there, he said, clearly intrigued, organically, like magic or nature, part of being a person. Yes. Music here is just like magic, packaged and sold. Cherry Doll was sliding her body down the microphone stand. Tell me what you want to do to me, she purred. The crowd cheered. Tell me what you want to do to me, she screamed at them. Drumbeat. Pent silence. I'll tell you what I want to do to you. She grabbed a guitar off a stand. Livonia didn't really have the vocabulary for this ragged, angry, violently enticing sound, and the way Cherry Doll seemed to have the whole crowd in thrall without, as far as Livonia could sense, using any actual enchantment or telepathic manipulation. Alfred and Livonia couldn't help it either. They went quiet and nodded along. Thessia was completely lost in the moment. Livonia could see her throwing her arms toward the stage with everyone else, waiting for Cherry Doll to brush their fingers. Music is still more than a product, Livonia suggested. This feeling isn't something you can package. That is very true. He turned to her again. I do love music, of course I do, but day to day, I hardly even have time to put on a record. As soon as you walk out the door, the real world smacks you in the face. He lifted a hand and flopped it back on the table. You get one beer in me, look what happens. Too philosophical. But get 2 beers in me, and I might dance. Really? You didn't seem like a guy who would dance. Even Thessia said my dancing is too unreserved, so it must be awful, but sure. She laughed. I say drink up, 1.5 to go. And are you worse than George? Because let me tell you, I'm watching him, and I don't know how you're supposed to dance to this music, but I know that can't be it. He choked a little on his beer. So maybe the bar is low. We both have a lot to think about, she suggested, getting more serious. I don't even know where to begin. I'm such an outsider, but things are changing fast here, aren't they? Yes. When I was a kid, it was a pretty depressing place, thinking back. A lot of people were very poor, and men had died or been injured in the war. There were more beggars on the streets. Kids my own age used to ask me for money when I walked to the park. Imagine being so hard up that you beg a blind kid for money. Were you wearing a little suit? She teased. Not by choice, but yes, I realized that might have been the problem. Well, over the years, they built up the city and artists started moving into the cheap apartments. Now it feels like anything is possible, except getting the old world back. For Nana is comforting in some ways, but it can also feel like you're dead. Every day you wake up knowing exactly what will happen. Even the surprises, the snowstorms and the sick goats, they're not really surprises. This feels like something you could choose, like you could become something, do something entirely new. Sometimes I worry it's all surface. All the old rules are still in place, Alfred said. Maybe not. It's somewhat trendy for kids who want to rebel to take on a cause that will piss off their fathers. That's a start, isn't it? I agree with the cause, Alfred said, but Thessia's father owns hundreds of slaves. Employees, technically, he pays them some pittance these days. But his factories have been moved offshore, and it's not like they can leave the factory town. When we get married, he's supposed to pass them to us, and she can disband them. But that plan only works if her father never suspects that that's her plan. All she has to do is not get caught going to see Cherry Doll, going to Finarlem Rights events, going to Ariani's rallies. She's going to sabotage her own chance to help. And so here we are, stuck with old rules, old expectations, and I can't be pissing off these guys like her father. I'm feeling the weight. I have a lot to prove, and what a great job of proving it I've been doing. You trusted your gut, right? If you can't trust your gut, what can you trust? I can't think of anything worse than having to be an inauthentic version of myself forever. He smiled in a way that felt like it was just for her, although she was probably reading too much into it. She wasn't even sure to what degree his expressions were for anyone. He was clearly aware of the need to fake it in a culture like this, but she wasn't sure how deeply he could comprehend the visual elements of the world. He was surely thinking about it, at least. This guy was always thinking. She would bet his brain never shut up. Much like the city, which was not at all what she had expected. She could sense the danger, see the shallow greed and the obsession with image and power that had always loomed in the Miralem imagination. But there was more. There was that crackle in the air. I know, Cherry Doll sang. Change is gonna come. Okay, so that's where I'm gonna stop for today. I'm so hot. Oh my gosh, it's so hot today. It's so hot in this room. I'm just like drenched in sweat. I hope you enjoyed this installment. I hopefully will have another installment next month. And, just to give you a little bit of background, if you like that kind of thing. If you want to know more about, I might have said it in the last video too. This installment, you kind of got to see Alfred's dynamic with his parents, which has dated all the way back to the very first incarnation of the story. I think, when did I say I created Alfred? I think 2004. I've always been a little surprised at how interesting I find his parents to write, because they're kind of like typical and annoying, but at the same time, there's like always been this little extra layer to them that I kind of always feel sort of bad for his mom. As was noted in the book, because of this ancestral curse that passes down to a future generation, Alfred's father was basically pressured into marrying someone who had telepathic abilities. There weren't a lot of acceptable women in Atlantis who have telepathic abilities, because they mostly come from the Miralem, who are the enemy. So he had to find someone with Halnari blood. The Halnari are the only Miralem that are on the Darmon side, but they're weird. So he found Ellie, who was only half Halnari and half Darmon. Somebody else did the hard work of actually marrying a Halnari, a full-blooded Halnari. The only problem with this plan is that, of course, Ellie only is half Miralem, so Alfred's only a quarter Miralem. So I've mentioned sometimes when advertising this book that, we have a blind main character in a fantasy story who doesn't have any compensatory magic. And, you know, that's not 100% accurate. He does have a tiny bit of telepathy, but it is very micro amount because his grandmother was not like a great telepath, and he's only got a quarter of that. So it gets him out of a couple of pickles, but it's definitely not something he's relying on very much. And he gets headaches when he uses telepathy. But as a result, like, his mother was put in a not great position at all when she married into this family. It was probably an arrangement that was like a financial benefit to her parents. And she probably, like, you know, had some like sexual chemistry with Thad. But I don't think that there was a lot of like really long-term like friendship between the two of them. And generally Miralem don't marry until they're like 30. And even among Darmons, the age of getting married has started to be later. But she was married off very young and had Alfred almost immediately. So she was probably like 20 when he was born. Very young. So, you know, they were only married like a couple of years. She was just this young wife, alone at home, managing the servants in this big house with this patriarch of the family, Drafin, angry old blind guy, just like lashing out at everyone, including her, and really not trusting Miralem, like basically like living with a mean old blind racist who hates your entire people, doesn't trust them. And then she has Alfred, and she like can kind of escape into this adorable little baby she's taking care of. Also, she had George. She was kind of like acting as a mom to George pretty much as soon as they got married, because he's a little older than Alfred. So she's doting on her boys, and then Drafin dies and blinds her firstborn son, thus kind of marking her accomplishment as a woman, producing the firstborn son with this mark of shame. And all these other mothers that she's desperately trying to fit in with would have then like kind of whispered about her in this very like pitying way. And like her options for like finding a good education for Alfred and like all that would have been very difficult. So I do feel bad for her. She was not put in an easy position, and thus the escapism into another world of magical England. Who wouldn't want to escape into Pride and Prejudice under those circumstances? The detail about Alfred, along with any other son of the families, being taught to make cocktails for his father's friends as a child, so that he had kind of a reason to be present in the room while the men are talking and start to absorb like how to be a part of that circle. That was a really early detail that popped up in like a really early story I wrote about him. And I've talked about this before, but one of the things that made me love Alfred as a character so much is that as soon as I started writing him, things like that would just kind of emerge. These like really specific details about his childhood and like past interests and things. A lot of characters just don't give up that kind of information about their lives. They never like want to flesh themselves out. And I think of it kind of almost like you're dealing with real people. Like Alfred is a very talkative character who is very quick to volunteer like a story about anything that he's done or been through. And I find sometimes that like as people are, so are characters. And I think that's funny that like if you have a character who's like a reticent personality, they're often pained to write because they don't tell you anything about themselves. Like, I'm the writer, you can tell me, but they're like, no, I'm not going to tell you. So that's one reason I've always loved writing him, is like he lives on the page, just even the tiny details. I love the scene of him in his father's office because those little things that just reveal bits of his character. They're just very easy for me to access. And then there's also the part where Thessia gets the groceries. Alfred asks for a can of espresso called Jazz Trio. I've had this in the story for the longest time. Somehow I made up all these like sodas that they had on their world, and one of them was this canned espresso drink that was Alfred's addiction. It has like a slim can with like instruments for like a jazz trio on the can. And it's this strong coffee drink, But when I originally created him, it was like the story took place in 2004 at the actual year that I was writing it. And I had to go down this whole rabbit hole of like, is it feasible for them to have canned coffee in 1969? And I found that canned coffee was invented in Japan in the 1960s. Good old Japan coming through for me. And would they have known about it? Yeah, I think that by the time we get to this point, and like the way it works in the Hidden Lands, when they're pulling culture from our world, they're paying the most attention to places where like there's a lot of advancement, both culturally and technologically. They're not like watching our entire world. They can't cover that much ground. I think by the 1960s they would be starting to observe Japan. This whole, I'll probably talk about this in a later video, but that whole thing makes it difficult for me sometimes, because as they're pulling pop culture, they would not necessarily be taking the stuff that I know as an American. They might pull something that was popular in like the UK in the 60s that I wouldn't even be aware of. So I keep trying to like pay a little bit of attention, consult some lists of like what culture was big in some other countries, and see if there's anything that I think they would have like been like, oh yeah, we're gonna grab that. But obviously I can't go and like actually experience every bit of pop culture from like multiple countries, some of which I don't even speak the language. So, you know, I do my best. Oh, hi, me again. I wanted to talk a little bit about Cherry Doll because one of my Discord members asked me what the inspiration was for Cherry Doll, and it occurred to me I had not really talked about her. At some point, all this will probably appear in the story, but I figured I'd give you a little bit of background and a playlist. So Cherry Doll, her real name is Mrira, and she started out as under her real name, being kind of like this cute little island girl singer. She comes from the Bloomy Islands, which the Bloomy Islands are south of Atlantis, and they are a popular vacation destination nowadays for like the wealthier mainlanders. But some hundreds of years ago, before Finarlem were invented, the Bloomy Islanders were enslaved by the mainlanders. So although they are colonites now, they got their own thing going. They're not entirely happy with the mainlanders sometimes. So she grew up there, and, you know, in this kind of laid back vacation island with surfing. You know, it's a little like Hawaii, but not entirely. The traditional music of the Bloomy Islands has like a lot of these big booming drums and kind of like a, you know, it's kind of a hip shaking sound. So it melded well with like the popular music of the 60s and became, you know, that people were going there to vacation. So they were wanting to bring back a little of that like island sound, good memories of vacation. So she started out doing that kind of thing, which is where her songs like Surfin' Doll were like her early part of her catalog. And as George and Alfred see her now, she has transitioned to being Cherry Doll, and she's starting to do more of her own thing, have more of her own power to write songs and like not be under the label as much. And in the 70s, she's about to get more 70s, but we're not there yet, so we won't talk about that. But her sound, there's not quite a comparison to it exactly, but I imagine it as having kind of like this like French 60s girl, like cute, fun, little sexy sound to it, but also would have like those big booming drums, like I Want Candy by the Strangeloves, or later on you'd hear it with Adam Ant, Bow Wow Wow. Some of those like acts of the late 70s and the early 80s had like, you know, big drums. And as her career progresses and she gets a little more, she leans more into like this sexiness and like more of like a powerful sound. Like she doesn't have a voice quite like Janis Joplin or something. Like it's not like a ragged bluesy voice, but she's got like a decent amount of power in her voice if she wants to. I imagine a song like Great King Rat by Queen that has kind of a very powerful like she would have like probably gone in a direction like that, along with some of like the glam sounds. Like Bowie's Diamond Dogs album particularly, I feel like has kind of a 70s Cherry Doll sound as her sound evolved, especially if you look up the like alternate take of 1984 where it leads into Dodo. I'm getting into some real like rock nerd channel stuff here. That one's not on Spotify. But anyway, if you want to get kind of a feel for how her sound would have, like at least sounds that would have inspired her and like contributed to like if you melded all this together, you can maybe imagine what Cherry Doll would sound like. So I'll put the playlist in the description for anybody who wants to hear that. Anyway, I don't think you're going to be watching this unless you already follow this channel, so I'm not going to do my usual spiel. Just thank you for being here. And as always, if you're enjoying this read aloud, the best way to support me doing these is to buy the books. These take a lot of time to do, but I really enjoy doing them. However, I do hope that if you like it, you will buy a copy of The Potion Dealers to keep, or any of my Hidden Lands books. If you want to read some different ones, that's fine too. It just makes me really happy to know that people are experiencing these stories. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I will see you soon with the next installment and other stuff. Bye!